This is the story time of the weirdest date that I've ever been on. Emphasis on fucking weird. I met this guy on Hinge, and normally I don't go on dates because I kind of hate people. Unless we have like an insane connection, I'm like, I don't want to fucking do this. But of course, I'm like, oh my god, we had such a fucking insane connection. No, but like we did have a really good connection. Him and I were texting a bunch, like we're really hitting it off, all is well. Did I not do my green concealer? I'm just extra fucking red today, love that. So he's like, let's go to dinner Friday night, 9:15, this sushi restaurant. And it's like such a nice sushi restaurant, so I'm like, fuck, like I've been wanting to try it, whatever. I'm going on this date, I'm gonna do this. You guys have to keep in mind, he was texting me, telling me how much he loves dates, he loves planning dates, he loves dates to be like a day-long thing. So I'm like, okay, whatever, but we're getting dinner, who cares? He texts me and he's like, God, I wish we could do something before dinner, like, let's do something before dinner, like I wanna see you before then. I'm like, okay. He's like, let's get matcha at 5:15, like meet you at this place. Because every man thinks it's fucking cute to be like, let's get matcha, because the name of my podcast is Midday Matcha. So they're like, let's get matcha. You know how many fucking times I've been to matcha? I don't even like matcha that much. Like, I should have just named my podcast Midday Caviar, so these motherfuckers are taking me to caviar instead of, so I've consumed so much matcha. So whatever, him and I, we get to matcha and it's good. We're having a great time. But the matcha place closes at 6 p.m. But we're in like the middle of like a deep conversation, so we don't even get out of the matcha place until the lady's like, get the fuck out. It's 6 p.m. and our dinner's at like 9:15. In my head, I'm thinking, oh, like of course, like this man has something planned because he said that he loves all day dates and stuff, and he loves planning. He's so fucking excited about these dates. And I'm like, that's just like a weird gap between 5 to 9, you know, like he definitely has something else planned. We get out of the matcha shop, we're still in such deep convo, and we're walking for like a while now. It's 10 minutes and I'm like, where is he leading me? But I realize like I'm kind of like leading him. We're walking so far, we end up on the West Side fucking highway. You don't know what the West Side highway is? It's a highway in New York. Like I'm on the west side of the fucking highway with this man, and I'm like, where are we going? Like, what are we doing? He's so deep in his story he's telling me, and I'm like, why am I on the West Side fucking highway at like 6:30 p.m. in heels and a white corset? Like, what is happening? Go to part 2. So we're on the West Side Highway, which is not a place you ever go on a date. Like, that's fucking weird. Well, I'm in heels and a corset. And I look at him and I'm like, okay, like, should we grab a drink or something before dinner? He's like, oh, like, I have to change before dinner. And I'm like, change before dinner? So I'm like, okay. Because in my head, I'm like, okay, so why the fuck did we get matcha? You know what I mean? Like, why did we could have waited till dinner. And now I'm walking on the West Side fucking highway with this random man, and it's like 6 p.m. and our dinner's not for like another 4 hours. I'm like, I'm gonna fucking lose it. Like, I'm gonna lose it. So I say to him, I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna go home. I'll freshen up before dinner, and like, you go home and you change before dinner. He's like, perfect. I'm like, I'm close to home, so like, I'll just walk there. He continues to fucking walk with me. He's literally not shutting the fuck up about this certain story he's telling me, like, and I'm just in my head so frustrated in my head, and I'm like, Livy, this is exactly why you don't go on fucking dates. I'm like, why did I wear a white corset and heels to fucking matcha? Like, I thought we were going like to, I'm like, I can't stand this. So we get to my apartment, I'm like, okay, bye, like, see you soon. I go upstairs, my roommate's like, wait, why are you home? Like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, I hate my date, I'm not going to dinner, like, I'm not going to dinner. I'm so annoyed. And I tell her everything. I'm like, we met and got matcha, and like, we were just walking on the West Side fucking highway, and like, I thought he was leading me somewhere. So annoyed at this point because I'm just like, what was that? I'm like, I don't want to go to dinner, and everyone's like, no, like, you have to go to dinner, because I called my sister, I texted my friends, and they're like, just still go to dinner. Like, yeah, it's weird, but still go to dinner. I'm in my head and I'm like, maybe this isn't weird, and I just think this is weird because, you know, like, I don't go on dates, so I don't know if this is weird. I just compare everything that like a man does to my roommate's boyfriend. Let's call him Zach. I'm like, would Zach do this to my roommate on a date when they first met? Like, would Zach do this on a first date? I'm like, no, Zach wouldn't fucking do this. Like, if my roommate came home and like told me Zach did this on their first date, I'd be like, okay, don't see that fucking weirdo again. And like, I was just so in my head about it. I was like, what was the reason for the like, what was the reason? I've just never had a date with an intermission in it. I ended up going to dinner, even though I like honestly really did not want to. I was like, Livy, don't be a fucking bitch. Like, don't cancel last minute on somebody. I'm glad I did go on the date because now he's my boyfriend. Kidding. That man is not my fucking boyfriend, and we both knew that. It was still like a fun dinner, even though it was fucking weird that he took me for matcha, and then we had like it was just still fucking weird. Like, I cannot wrap my head around it, and I'm like, why the fuck did he do that? That is the story time of the weirdest date that I have ever been on. What was the reason for the matcha? Like, let a bitch know.
Am I wrong for refusing to sleep with my wife's sister? So I, male 32, think this isn't controversial at all, but my wife's 31 female, family, and even some of my friends think that I'm making a big deal out of it. My wife has PCOS, which doesn't make it impossible, but very difficult for us to conceive a child. We've been trying for 3 years and it hasn't worked out. In addition to the traditional way, we've tried IVF and at one point had a family member who offered to have a baby for us with their spouse. Sadly for us, they backed out when the baby was born. We get how difficult giving up your own child would be, and so while me and my wife were obviously devastated, we understood and couldn't blame them. However, since our near miss, my wife has been getting more intense about having a child, which has led her to recently asking me that I do it the natural way with her sister. I think she's just really high on emotions right now, and she just sounds really frustrated and desperate and emotionally exhausted. To be perfectly clear, we have the money to do another round of IVF, but my wife thinks it won't work again and will just be throwing money down the drain. This was a huge shock for me for obvious reasons, and while I get that it's probably the most probable way for us to have a genetically related child, it just seems the wrong way to do it. Not only does it feel like cheating, despite her permission and stepping over a line, my wife also grew up quite envious of her sister, who was the typical popular girl, and part of me thinks that even if I'm willing to, my wife would end up resenting me, her sister, and maybe even the child. My wife's sister is apparently completely understanding of our situation and is on board with the idea, which honestly weirds me out even more. I also don't believe it. I have asked her about how she feels myself, and every time she dodges the question by saying something along the lines of, I just want my sister to be happy. To me, that's a major red flag, and I've asked my wife if her sister feels like she's being pressured to the idea. To me, that's a major red flag, and I've asked my wife if her sister feels like she's being pressured into the idea. But my wife keeps telling me that her sister knows what she's doing and would totally say no if she genuinely didn't want to go through with the plan. I've made it clear that I don't want to have a child this way, which has upset my wife a lot. She said that I'm punishing her for her medical issues simply because I can't get over myself. Her mother and father are very, logical, should I say. They think it is definitely out there as a solution, but get that it's a practical one for a complicated situation. Some of my friends even think that I'm being a baby about it, joking that there will be many men who would jump at this opportunity. Ugh. The thing is, I get the rational reasons for doing this, and my reluctance at the end of the day is based on the feeling of it just being wrong and not being good in the long term for any of our family relationships. Am I just being stubborn and childish about a sticky situation? I don't think so. This is just overall really weird, and I get your point for not wanting to do it because it's weird. Am I wrong for letting my stepdaughter spend a night in jail instead of bailing her out right away? My wife, 38 female, and I, 39 male, have been married for 6 years. We have 2 kids, 8 and 5. My wife also has a daughter, Mary, 18, from before we got together. Mary is in her senior year of high school and lives with us. She will go see her bio dad 2 weekends a month, but due to her extracurricular activities, it is not always an every other weekend thing. Since bio dad lives about 2 hours away, Mary works out times with her dad for her to visit him and she drives herself there. This past weekend, my wife took our 2 younger kids to visit her sister who lives about 3 hours away. Before my wife left, Mary told us that she was going to visit her dad that weekend. I was going to stay home to get some work done on some home projects that had been neglected over the holidays. So on Friday, after everyone else had left, I kicked back and took advantage of the very rare opportunity of having an empty house to myself. I bought a nice bottle of bourbon, visited our local dispensary, and bought myself a nice steak. About 3 a.m., I was awoken by a phone call. Any parent knows that a phone call at that time of night is a nightmare situation. So I immediately answered. It was my wife, and she told me that Mary had been arrested and had just been called from our local jail. Apparently, she lied about going to her dad's house and had instead attended a party. The party got busted and Mary panicked and tried to run. Of course, the cops caught her and arrested her. My wife said that the police would allow me to go get Mary right away instead of keeping her in jail. I told my wife that I had been drinking earlier and was probably not safe to drive, let alone drive to a police station. I told her that I would pick Mary up first thing in the morning. My wife yelled at me for being irresponsible by drinking to that point in case of an emergency. I told her that I was home by myself and everyone else in the family was supposed to be hours away, so I essentially had zero responsibility for anyone besides myself. She eventually calmed down enough to see my side. The next morning, I went and got Mary right when I woke up. When I saw her, it was obvious she had been crying a lot and she didn't say a word to me on the way home. She immediately went to her room when we got home and didn't come out the entire day. The next day when my wife got home, Mary was still in her room. My wife talked to her and then came to talk to me. She told me that both her and Mary are disappointed in me that I made her spend a night in jail instead of getting her right away. She said that Mary is traumatized by the whole thing. I told her, good, maybe next time she won't lie and do stupid shit. I agree. I'm sorry. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Hello, you lied. The consequences of your actions. Hello. I reminded her that Mary is an adult now and she has to get used to facing consequences of her actions, and this should be a very clear reminder of what those consequences could be. What did I say? My wife said that that lesson could have been made without making her spend a night in jail.
I'm an asshole for not inviting my daughter to dinner after she called my girlfriend a gold digger. I've never been particularly close with my daughter. After me and her mom divorced when she was 13, I saw her maybe once every 2 to 3 months, and on birthdays and holidays. I do blame myself for that, because I went into a kind of a short midlife crisis, and I kind of dated girls here and there, but I wouldn't really classify those as relationships. 6 months ago, I started dating my current girlfriend. About 6 weeks ago, I invited most of my family out to dinner, my daughter, my siblings, and their parents, and my parents. Our relationship was at a point that I wanted to introduce her as my girlfriend with the family. Everyone seemed to like her, we had a fun dinner, but after a few glasses of wine, me and my daughter got into a small argument. I don't even remember what it was about, but she did call my girlfriend a gold digger, and she just basically ruined the dinner. I'm not delusional. I know one of the reasons my girlfriend is with me is for money. It's the same way I'm with my girlfriend for her look. Last weekend, I threw a small indoor barbecue at my house, and I again invited most of my family but my daughter, because she doesn't like my girlfriend. However, when my daughter found out she wasn't invited, she called me a selfish, narcissistic prick, and some of my family's taken her